It's not a threat. I was really hurt by you and your friends, you know? I'm saying I'll forgive it for the price of a meal. So just leave your wallet and go. I realized that the apology was a lie after all. Not just Susan, but Bob also said with a mocking smile. This was their intention from the beginning. We sighed as we watched the two of them rant. Come on, just leave your wallet and go. You know what'll happen if you talk about this, right? Bob is in a higher position than Mike, you know. At those words, I smiled. If they're going that route, there's no need to hold back. Fine, but are you sure about this? You're gonna regret it. Thinking I was bluffing, the two burst out laughing. And they said, like we care. I took out my wallet and placed it on the table. Seeing that, the two mocked me, saying, Thanks. We'll give the wallet to Mike later. Then, thanks for the treat. Mike clenched his fist in anger, but I held him back and left the room, ignoring the two. Immediately after, we took action. You'll be the ones regretting this. I'm Catherine. I currently live a peaceful life with my husband Mike and our son John. I met my husband in college, and we began talking more after being paired up for group projects. We shared the same hobbies and soon started dating. After graduating and working for 3 years, we got married. A few years later, we were blessed with our son. Mike works in IT sales and is highly respected at his company. But I know he struggled in his early days. He overcame that period, and I admire him a lot. Apparently, his decision to go into sales was influenced by his family business. His father was involved in the management of a company, and Mike aspires to be like him. I still get tough feedback, but I want to be like Dad. I remember getting a lot of support from my in-laws when John was born. My mother-in-law graduated from a culinary school and currently works as the hostess at a renowned restaurant. Her husband is involved in the business side of it. Their motto is do your best at whatever you think of at that moment. I've always had a fondness for design, and alongside my administrative job, I would draw as a hobby. This hobby paid off over time. As I began to take on freelance web design projects, the scale of the projects gradually increased. Then one day, Mike approached me with a proposition. Hey Catherine, it looks like the company is in need of a designer. Want to give it a shot? They've got a few other prospects, but I really love your designs. It might get a bit busy, but I'll help out. What do you think? Catherine, there's a warmth in your designs. You should try it. Initially, I was hesitant, but my father-in-law, who happened to be visiting, agreed with Mike. Bolstered by their support, I decided to conceptualize a design. Once I committed, I was driven to excel. I researched the product and brainstormed with Mike to figure out the best design approach. Though it took some time, I finally crafted a design I was proud of. To my gratitude, my design was chosen. The product apparently did very well in sales, and both Mike and I were ecstatic when we heard the news. We thanked my in-laws for their support, and they were overjoyed, as if they had succeeded themselves. Catherine, it's incredible. It's all thanks to your design. Oh, it's nothing, really. Having this experience means a lot. Thank you. With this turn of events, I began to invest more time into web designing, which started as a side gig. Eventually, my earnings from design matched those from my day job, so I quit the administrative position and now work as a freelancer. Thanks to Mike's company, I also get the opportunity to design whenever they launch a new product. Our son, John, who's now in middle school, has grown into a bright and kind-hearted boy. He's currently passionate about playing soccer in his school club. Life's good. However, there's one thing that bothers me. Oh, Catherine, is that you? Hello. Oh, Susan, hi. It's about Susan. Her son, Jake, is also in the same soccer club as John. John and Jake get along really well. They even ended up in the same class this year and often hang out during weekends. John frequently talks about Jake. Jake once visited our house, and he's a very polite boy. I was glad John had such a good friend. But to be honest, Susan can be quite overbearing. I first met her during the school's open house. It was clear to me from the start that she was Jake's mother.
Jake, you are definitely Mama's pride and joy.
Mom, stop, it's embarrassing. It's fine. The class ended, and during the break, parents started conversing with the students. That's when Susan exclaimed loudly. Jake turned red and shook his head dismissively. I remember thinking at that moment what a loving mother she seemed to be, but that wasn't the reality.
Really, Jake is by far the best. The others seem to be just playing around during their presentation.
The classroom grew momentarily silent at her words. Jake frowned slightly and retorted, "Didn't I tell you to stop it?" Everyone took their presentations seriously. I couldn't help but stare at her, wondering if her comment was really appropriate. Eventually, the parents had to leave for another meeting, so they began to exit the classroom. Mom. John, you did well in your presentation. You have club activities today, right?
Yeah. Do your best. I'm gonna make your favorite hamburger steak for dinner. Really? Awesome.
Right before leaving the classroom, John cheerfully spoke with his mother. Surrounding kids told him, "Lucky you, getting hamburger steak." I felt relieved seeing him being able to handle the situation smoothly. The parent-teacher meeting was open seating, and we were told we could sit anywhere. I chose a seat towards the corner. That's when Susan approached and started talking to me. "Aren't you John's mother?" "Huh?" I was taken aback by the sudden conversation, but she ignored my surprise and plopped down beside me. "I wanted to meet you. I'm Susan." Even though I felt cornered, I listened to her. But how did she know I was John's mother when we hadn't met before? Noticing my confusion, she continued. "You were talking about dinner with John earlier, right?" That's how I knew. And calling hamburger steak a treat seems so laid back. I was taken aback by her words. Why was she criticizing our dinner choice, especially since we just met? "John loves hamburger steak, and I don't think it's your place to comment," I replied. Whether she didn't like my response or not, she clearly looked displeased. "Well, that's true. My husband works at a major company, so he doesn't quite get the ordinary tastes." "What company does your husband work for?" I didn't feel like engaging with her, so I just brushed her off. Luckily, the meeting started, and things settled down. But right after, she asked me, "Wanna grab some coffee or something?" I tried to decline a few times, but she said, "Come on, it's just some mom friends bonding. Besides, Jake and John are good friends." Left with little choice, I agreed. We exchanged contact information and went for coffee before heading home. She boasted about her wealthy life and her husband during our coffee chat. Since then, she invited me for coffee several times a month. Even though our kids got along, I wasn't thrilled, but I agreed. One time I declined. She mentioned, "You know, my husband knows a lot of people, even John's club coach." It felt like a veiled threat. So I kept up the reluctant friendship with Susan. What shocked me further was discovering that Susan's husband worked at the same company as Mike. I remember nearly spitting out my drink in surprise when I found out. She had mentioned it was a major company, but never said which one. I hadn't imagined it'd be the same one Mike worked for. I learned this when she visited my home one day. Jake had come over to play, and Susan came to pick him up in the evening. I had hoped to just meet her at the door, but she came in since our kids were there. "Isn't your husband working for XYZ Corporation, Catherine?" As she said this, I nearly choked on my tea. Seeing my shocked face, Susan seemed pleased, and I had a bad feeling about where this was headed.
"Why?"
"Because I saw a business card in your room with your husband's name on it, and I recognized the company name."
"Hold on, are you saying you just went into our room?"
"No, I didn't mean to. I was just looking for the bathroom and happened to open the wrong door." I was truly glad my sons weren't around to hear this. I had given Susan directions to the restroom, so I genuinely thought she was lying. But I had only told her verbally, so I couldn't really push back too hard. Indeed, in Mike's room, he has business cards for work. I designed the business cards for Mike's company, so there are several different types, and he had some displayed under a desk protector. She must have seen those. Stunned and at a loss for words, Susan approached and said something. "I really don't like you too." Her previously friendly demeanor had vanished, and Susan's eyes were now sharp and piercing as she glared at me. "Do you enjoy taking work away from other people's husbands?"
Excuse me?
Not understanding the implication of Susan's words, I just stood there, stunned. She threw out one last barb. "Well, whatever. Just remember, I'm gonna make sure you regret this." I was at a loss for words and later recounted everything to Mike.
So, Bob's wife is Catherine's friend?
It seems so. It must be a coincidence, but she seemed to have some sort of grudge against us. "Who's this Bob guy?" Thinking a bit, Mike took a deep breath and started explaining. "I don't think it's good to discuss such things, but Bob is in the planning department. He's quite assertive and..." From what Mike explained, the product planning department shares its products with the sales team to generate revenue. Bob, who's considered a top player in the product planning department, not only holds a significant position but is also well known for a particular trait. That trait seems to be his strong belief in meritocracy, or in other words, a lot depends on whether Bob is passionate about something or not. He's quite the meritocrat. Some people even say it's like heaven or hell working with him. I see. But I still don't understand why Susan hates us so much. Yeah, I'm not sure either. I don't have a deep relationship with Bob. Sorry for getting you involved in this mess. It's fine, but what about John and Jake? It's not good for the kids to be so close and their parents to be like this. Yeah, I'll try to find out more about it. Thanks. A few days after our conversation, Susan reached out. Feeling anxious, I answered her call, and she sounded much more apologetic than usual. "I'm so sorry about the other day, I was just stressed about my husband's work not going well." I decided to hear her out as she sounded different. She apologized and hoped that we could get along since we have husbands working at the same company. "So, how about we all go out for dinner?" Considering her previous behavior, I was hesitant, but thinking of our kids' friendship, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. "That's fine. Thank you. I'll arrange the place, and I'll let you know the details later." She sounded pleased as she ended the call. The day arrived, and we headed to the restaurant Susan had chosen. It was a fancy place, renowned for its seafood. However, even after a while, there was no sign of Susan and her husband. I tried calling her. When I mentioned my name to the receptionist, the staff member looked concerned. "I'm sorry, but the reservation is only for 2 people.
What?
Mike and I were puzzled. What was going on? Asking the staff member to wait, I immediately called Susan. Hello Susan? So, the restaurant just told me the reservation is for 2 people. She laughed and told us to wait a moment. Soon, Susan and a man emerged. Seeing the man, Mike said, "Bob, good to see you." It was then that I realized the man was Bob. Grinning widely, Susan and Bob looked at us. I had a bad feeling. "I'm sorry, I made a mistake with the reservation." Susan's nonchalance bothered me. Then she said something even more shocking. "Well, mistakes happen. But let's not waste the food, right? What are you getting at?" "Look, Mike, I'm soon gonna be the head of the planning department. You're doing well in sales, but you're still a newbie. If you don't want things to go sour, you might want to listen to what I have to say." "Are you threatening us?" "It's not a threat. Catherine, and you have hurt me deeply. I'm offering you a way to make amends. Just leave your wallet and go." I realized that the apology was indeed a lie after all. This was their intention from the beginning. We sighed as we watched the 2 of them arguing. "Look, just leave your wallet and get out. By the way, you do know what will happen if you tell anyone about this, right? Bob's higher up than Mike, after all." At that, I couldn't help but smile. If they're playing it that way, there's no need to hold back anymore. "All right, but are you guys sure about this? You're gonna regret it." Maybe they thought I was bluffing, but the 2 burst into laughter. Then they blurted out, like we care. I took out my wallet and placed it on the table. Seeing that, the two jeered at me. We'll give Mike his wallet back later. Thanks for the treat then. Mike looked furious, clenching his fists, but I calmed him down. Ignoring the two, I left the room. We quickly took action.
They're the ones who are gonna regret this. Yeah, can't let people who pull stunts like this go unpunished.
After a while, a call came in on my phone. Recognizing the number, I answered with a smile. Catherine? Looks like we're almost done here. With that, I handed the phone over to Mike. After a brief exchange, Mike hung up. Well, shall we go? Seems like things have heated up. Mike looked very upset. We then headed back to the restaurant Susan had chosen. Once there, we asked the waiter to call the owner. Soon after, the landlady, who was also Mike's mom, hurried out. Thank you for your help. I'm sorry for the trouble.
It's fine. People like them need to be taught a lesson.
The mother-in-law looked just as angry as Mike did earlier. We were led to a room. As we slid the door open slightly, a tense atmosphere was evident. Inside were Susan, Bob, and some senior officials from Mike's company, including his father-in-law. Now, why had it come to this? It's simple. The restaurant Susan chose happened to be the one run by Mike's mom. We realized it as soon as Susan told us to meet there. It was a coincidence, but since we were going there anyway, Mike decided to call his mom. There, it was revealed that Susan had only booked for 2. That's right. We knew she hadn't made a reservation for 4, but played along anyway. Once we understood Susan's intentions, we immediately reported it to the mother-in-law present. Being straightforward people, both Mike's mom and Mike reported it to his dad. That led to the current situation. Bob, what's going on here? A man asked Bob. Well, it's... No excuses, just tell us everything. Bob was flustered, understandably so. That guy is Mr. Young from the planning department's top management. Next to the CEO is someone from the sales department's upper echelon. I think my father-in-law might have called them over. Well, he was the former CEO, so it's understandable how he'd react if he found out his family was being treated this way, especially in his wife's restaurant, by employees from when he was in charge. Right, actually my father-in-law used to be the CEO of the company where Mike works. He's now retired and not involved in its management, but he was highly respected during his tenure. Even now, he's still in touch with company folks. After hearing the story from my mother-in-law, he immediately reached out to the company to explain the situation. When the CEO hears that one of his employees is extorting money from another employee by using their position, he's gonna come running. The two, who didn't know this, were surprised by the sudden appearance of the company executives at the restaurant. They seemed unable to grasp the situation. Mike said he wanted me to accept this. Yes, I was invited because my husband often works with Mike. Even now, I'm taken aback by the blatant lies coming out of their mouths. They show no remorse. And I wonder if they don't realize that such obvious lies will be found out. Then, to cut off Bob's words, Mike entered the room. To the astonishment of the two, Mike politely said, "Excuse me." You. Bob glared at Mike as soon as he saw him. We understood the situation completely, but for Susan and Bob, it must have been confusing. Before Bob could make a move, my father-in-law spoke up. I'm the former CEO, George. I'm retired now and have handed over the company to young Mr. Young here. By the way, Mike is my son. But he didn't get his job at the company through any connection of mine. In fact, I wasn't involved in his hiring at all. And I should mention that this restaurant is run by my wife. Listening to my father-in-law's explanation, the two seemed to finally grasp the situation, and their faces turned pale in an instant. Susan let out an almost wordless sigh, and Bob was shaking uncontrollably. Oh no. Susan, looking as if she couldn't believe it, seemed more flustered than I'd ever seen her. Let's cut the chit-chat and get down to discussing the matter at hand. The discussion, or rather the one-sided grilling they received, began in a heavy atmosphere, and the two were struggling to find their words. Susan's resentment towards me was apparently related to some design work at the company. From a proposal Mike brought up, it seems Susan was another candidate they had considered. Originally, when the project was discussed in the company, my design was chosen after a search among friends and family for talented designers. This boosted Mike's reputation. Moreover, despite being relatively young, Mike had mastered his own sales techniques, earning trust from his juniors and contributing to the company's performance. It irritated me that he was taking credit for accomplishments that he'd achieved with the help of his wife's talents. I personally think Mike has genuinely been working hard, but didn't you feel the same when you received advice from him? That left Bob at a loss for words, which was accentuated by a sharp comment from a senior planning department executive. Bob also felt slighted because, after finishing their sales tasks, the sales department would give precise advice to the planning team. This irritated Bob, making him feel like his products were being overshadowed by Mike's. As Mike's answers continued to receive praise, Bob grew resentful and frequently vented to Susan. Then, one day, Susan overheard me talking about my work with some other moms. I loved designing and often drew illustrations for school events like PTA meetings. Some of the moms knew I worked freelance. So when Susan found out that I was the designer chosen for the company project, she started picking on me. Having heard this, we were just speechless. We were honestly astounded that they would conceive such a scheme out of jealousy. Moreover, we learned another shocking truth. I'm really disappointed in you. Please wait, I'm truly sorry about this. While Bob was begging, Mr. Young coldly said,
I've heard from one of our planning department guys. I hope it's not true, but there's a significant amount of money being spent on planning. Is it really all going towards actual products?
At this, Bob froze, and Susan went pale. It seems Bob had been embezzling funds under the guise of planning expenses. This revelation took even us by surprise. It seems Susan was also complicit in the scheme. How'd you get caught? You said it would be a secret. I don't know. Bob, angered by Susan's words, yelled back like that. The expression on his face was that of someone who had inadvertently admitted to embezzlement, but it was too late. Mr. Young sighed and bowed his head to his father-in-law. I'm truly sorry. I didn't expect something like this to happen in the company that Mr. George entrusted me with. It's my lack of supervision.
No, it's not you, Mr. Young, or the senior staff of sales and marketing. It's this couple who can't do anything but play dirty tricks. You both are gonna pay for this.
Hold on, she's the one to blame. Excuse me? Weren't you the one who said we could embezzle money?
Hey, we're in a store, keep it down. Shut up. If you hadn't interfered. How dare you act all high and mighty when you're the son? Well, if the husband is like this, so is the wife.
In the end, Mr. Young handed the arguing couple over to the police. It was only natural since they had embezzled money. It caused quite a scene and was a hassle for the store, but the mother-in-law handled it with a dignified attitude, and the situation was quickly under control. I heard from Mike that Bob got fired from the company and was apparently sued for damages by the company. They dealt with him pretty strictly, probably because it involved the company's products. Jake was taken in by Susan's parents for a while. After the incident, Susan's parents came over to apologize. From what I heard then, the couple is living quietly in isolation, possibly as a form of penance. I couldn't help but wonder how they ended up like this when I saw how sincere Susan's parents seemed. I was worried about Jake, but the company made sure that no word of the incident got out, so thankfully, no rumors spread at school, and Jake was fine. It's unfortunate what happened to Jake. I talked to John the other day, and Jake seems to be doing fine at school. He's a good kid, and everyone trusts him. Instead of being down about his parents, he seems more angry at them. That's good to hear. I haven't seen Susan and Bob since that incident. Jake, however, still hangs out with John and even comes over to our place from time to time. Watching the two of them play so happily, I hope they never end up like us. By a stroke of luck,
We were safe this time, but I truly believe that our daily actions attract the people and opportunities in our lives. I want to cherish my relationships with others more than ever.
Bob quickly stuffed his smartphone into his jacket pocket. Then suddenly, Lily said to Bob with a serious face,
Bob, why did you bury the baby in the mountain?
Hearing this, both I and Natalie stopped our conversation and looked at Lily, stunned.
What?
Bob's face turned pale.
What are you talking about?
Bob answered, flustered.
The baby I saw on your phone earlier.
Lily said with a stern expression.
Show me the photos on your phone again.
Prompted by Lily, Bob opened his photo album and showed pictures from their recent camping trip.
Not this one.
Saying so, Lily quickly grabbed the smartphone from Bob's hand and swiped the screen. In an instant, Bob exclaimed, "Oh," and tried to take his phone back. Dodging Bob's attempt, Lily turned the phone screen to me and Natalie to show them the picture. It was a photo of an unfamiliar young woman.
She approached me first. She said she was having work issues and wanted some advice.
Bob insisted he was just accompanying her because she asked him to. Thanks to Lily's mysterious ability, I came to know about Bob's hidden side. The reason Bob was coming home late and constantly looking at his phone late at night was this. I made Bob guide me to the mountain where the baby was buried. Holding the unearthed baby. I was heading to Bob's workplace a few days later. My name is Shelby Roberts. I'm 29 years old. I've been married to Bob for exactly a year now. Bob is a salaried worker like me and is also 29. I also work a full-time job and spend my days quite busy. My husband and I don't have any kids yet. I met Bob through a friend's introduction. After dating for several years, we got married last year. The wedding was truly touching. Bob helps with the household chores. He even cooks dinner once in a while. He's the perfect husband in my eyes. Marrying him, I felt truly blessed. About 20 minutes drive from our apartment, my older sister Natalie lives. Natalie is 3 years older than me and is already married with a 5-year-old daughter named Lily. Natalie and her family purchased a house where the three of them live. I adore my niece, Lily. Lily affectionately calls me Aunt Shelby and is very fond of me. Once, when I visited my sister's house, Lily suddenly told me,
Hey, when I was in Mommy's belly, I remember hearing your voice. Huh?
I was genuinely taken aback.
Do you remember being in Mom's belly, Lily? I heard Dad's voice too.
Lily replied with a serious face. I've heard of kids having memories from the womb, but this was the first time someone told me directly about it. When I told Natalie about this, she said, yeah, every now and then, Lily mentions things from when she was inside me. I never knew kids could remember such things. Impressed, Natalie shared more with me.
That's not all. Sometimes, when I can't find something, she tells me where it is. And it's not like she saw me put it there, but whenever I look where Lily tells me to, I always find it there. That's amazing. I can't quite put my finger on it, but Lily seems to have some sort of special gift.
Natalie said, looking at me earnestly. A little way off, Lily was innocently playing with her teddy bear. It made me wonder if young children might have some sort of unique power. As these thoughts crossed my mind, I gazed at Lily. Sometime later, Bob started coming home later and later. At first, I figured work must be tough, but lately, he'd often come home after midnight. I began to worry. Late one night, as Bob hurriedly headed for the shower, I called out.
Bob, you've been working late a lot, huh? Yeah, the boss just won't let me leave on time.
With that, Bob quickly shut the door behind him and went into the bathroom. About 5 minutes later, Bob came out. I offered him the dinner I had prepared, but he replied, sorry, I'm just too tired to eat.
Well, I'm gonna head to bed then. Good night.
It was already quite late, and I figured Bob would join me in the bedroom soon, given how tired he claimed to be. But an hour, then 2, passed, and he didn't come. Feeling restless, I quietly walked out to peek into the living room. In the dimly lit room, Bob was seated on the couch, engrossed in his smartphone. From the movement of his fingers, it looked like he was texting someone. And he had a big grin on his face. Why was he so happy, especially after such a long day? Was he messaging someone? And if so, who? My heart filled with anxiety. Lacking the courage to confront Bob, I returned to the bedroom.
Hey, Bob, how about we go camping during the upcoming long weekend?
One day, I brought up the idea. Although we were newlyweds, we hadn't gone out anywhere lately. Until not long ago, we'd spend our weekends going to the movies or visiting amusement parks. I wanted to go to the mountains with Bob and spend some quality time together.
There's this campsite in the mountains. We could set up a tent, have a barbecue, and at night, look at the stars. Sounds fun, right?
Bob didn't seem too excited, but I really wanted to go. I believed he'd enjoy it once we got there.
All right, fine. But what about the car? Ours isn't big enough for all the camping gear.
When Bob mentioned that, I decided to consult Natalie. One day, I visited Natalie's place alone. I asked her about the car situation.
You can borrow our van. And feel free to use our tent too.
Natalie happily offered. Her van was big and suited for mountain roads, with ample space for our gear. I thanked Natalie for her kindness.
Thanks, you're a lifesaver. Take some time and relax together as a couple, it's been a while.
While I was talking with Natalie, Lily overheard and chimed in, "Are you guys going camping? I wish I could go."
That'd be nice, we should go with Lily next time.
The day before our camping trip finally arrived, and I borrowed a car from Natalie's house and drove it home. The next day, Bob and I headed out in that car for a 3-day, 2-night camping adventure. Breathing in the fresh air, surrounded by nature, I felt truly rejuvenated. Bob seemed to be enjoying himself more than usual, with a big smile on his face.
I'm really glad we decided to head to the mountains, even if it took a bit of convincing.
As I chatted with Bob, that was what I thought deep down. But late that night, Bob, who was sleeping next to me, got up quietly and started using his smartphone. I pretended to be asleep. He spent about 2 hours on his phone. It seemed like he was texting someone. The same thing happened the next night. Then, on the 3rd day, we returned home from the campsite. It was around 4 p.m.
When were we supposed to return this car? Natalie said if we bring it back tomorrow, it'll be fine.
As I responded, Bob's excitement was evident.
So, can I take the car out for a bit? Now?
I was surprised. We had just come back from camping, and he wanted to go out again.
I wanted to invite some local buddies and try out a big car like this. You're not gonna drink, right? I promise, no drinking. When will you be back? I'll make sure to be home before midnight. We're on vacation, it's okay once in a while, right?
After some persuasion from Bob, I reluctantly agreed. Whistling a cheerful tune, Bob hopped into the car and left in high spirits. Even if they were local buddies, I wondered if they would all be available on such short notice. While pondering this, I spent a lonely evening at home. Just a few minutes before midnight, Bob came back.
See, I made it home before midnight and I didn't drink,
Bob said immediately upon returning. Then, he quickly took out his smartphone and started checking it again.
Bob, you've been on your phone a lot lately,
I said with a hint of annoyance.
I'm just texting the friends I was with earlier.
Saying this, Bob took his smartphone to the bathroom. The next day, Bob and I went to Natalie's house to return the car and tent. When we gave them some snacks we bought near the campsite as a thank you gift, Lily was delighted. Natalie invited Bob and me inside and made us coffee. Lily had become quite fond of Bob as they had met several times. Since Natalie referred to Bob as Mr. Bob, Lily had also started calling him that. Lily and Bob were sitting on the couch playing together, with Bob responding with a warm smile. Soon after, Lily requested to see the photos Bob had taken during the camping trip on his smartphone. While Natalie and I were chatting, she asked,
How was the camping? Did you have fun? Yes, it was great. Thanks for the car and tent, they were a huge help.
Suddenly, Bob said in a loud voice to Lily, don't touch it without permission. That's it, as he quickly took his smartphone away from Lily. Lily seemed to have fiddled with the smartphone.
Nuh-uh, you can't touch things without asking.
Natalie gently reprimanded Lily.
I wanted to see more of Bob's photos,
Lily said with a pout. Bob hurriedly put his phone back in his pocket. Suddenly, Lily said seriously to Bob,
Bob, why did you bury the baby in the mountain?
Hearing this, both Natalie and I stopped talking and stared at Lily in surprise. Bob's face turned pale as a ghost.
What are you talking about?
Stammering, Bob responded.
The baby I saw on your phone earlier,
Lily said with a serious look.
Bob, show me the pictures on your phone again.
Prompted by Lily, Bob opened his photo gallery to display camping photos.
Not this one,
Lily responded, swiftly taking the phone from Bob and swiping the screen. Bob, taken aback, exclaimed, "Oh," and tried to snatch his phone back quickly. Avoiding Bob's grab, Lily showed Natalie and me the phone screen. A picture displayed an unfamiliar young woman. She was holding a large baby doll plush, grinning widely. In the background was a claw machine. It seemed the photo was taken in an arcade. Presumably, the stuffed doll was a prize she won from the claw machine.
Who's this?
I asked in a low voice. Looking panicked, Bob tried to retrieve the phone from Lily. Just then, Lily handed the phone to me, and as I swiped, a photo of Bob and the young woman taking a selfie while closely hugging each other appeared. Swiping again revealed another picture of Bob and the woman, lying side by side, apparently in a car. Upon closer inspection, the car's interior matched the one Natalie had lent out. The seats were flattened, and it seemed the two were lying down, taking pictures. Bob's eyes darted left and right. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Natalie looked at me with concern. Just then, our brother-in-law, returning from work, entered. I wanted to immediately confront Bob about the woman in the photos. However, I couldn't do it in front of Lily and our brother-in-law. Thankfully, Natalie suggested that she take care of Lily with the help of our brother-in-law and that we should move to another room. Bob, Natalie, and I went upstairs, closed the door, and continued the conversation.
Who's the woman in the pictures?
Bob was reluctant to speak. However, after persistent questioning from Natalie and me, Bob finally admitted. The woman in the photo was a coworker named Jane Smith. She's 23. She had joined his workplace as a new recruit this spring. Bob had been cheating on me with this woman. I felt like I was about to pass out.
She was the one who approached me. She said she was having trouble at work and wanted to talk, Bob tried to explain.
Bob, can you show us what kind of messages you exchanged with this Jane? Natalie suddenly asked. I can't really do that, Bob exclaimed in distress.
If there was infidelity, I want to see the evidence as your sister-in-law. Of course, Shelby should know as well, Natalie argued.
Bob was adamant about not showing his phone, but after Natalie's strong persuasion, he reluctantly handed it over to her. When Natalie looked at Bob's phone, there was a ton of conversations with Jane. The two whispered sweet nothings to each other multiple times a day. One day, I was shocked to read their messages. It was a message from late at night when Bob went out with the car he borrowed from Natalie.
Today was fun. It was only for a short time, but I'm glad I got to see you, Jane. I was so happy to get cozy with you in such a big car. I only sneaked out of the house today just for that. Bob, when are you gonna get divorced from your wife? Try to do it soon. Someday, if we can get married, you'll give birth to my child, won't you, Jane? Yes. I trust you and will wait for you.
I was stunned and frozen from shock after reading this.
What's this?
Bob was sweating profusely, looking extremely uncomfortable.
Bob, tell me everything.
Bob, realizing he couldn't escape the situation, started to confess in detail. Jane had approached Bob for advice and they started going out for meals. Bob drove Jane home since it was late. She still lived with her parents so they couldn't go to her house, so they would park the car in a nearby park and talk until late. Eventually, they became intimate. The times Bob claimed to be working late, he was actually out on dates with Jane. One day, after coming back from camping, he wanted to go on a drive date using the car he borrowed from Natalie. Bob lied to me, met up with Jane, and they enjoyed their drive. They stopped at an arcade on the way. Upon Jane's insistence, Bob won a large baby plush toy from a claw machine. "It's like we're a married couple with a baby," Jane exclaimed joyfully, holding the plush. They decided to bury the plush toy in the mountain like a time capsule and promised to dig it up once they got married to remember the day. They placed the toy in a large plastic bag and buried it in the mountain behind the park where they often parked to get cozy. Since we just returned from camping, there was a shovel in the car, which was convenient for them.
What's that all about?
I was disgusted to hear the story. Natalie, sitting next to me, was lost for words, frowning. Burying a baby plush in the mountains is creepy. And what's more heartbreaking is that they've already made promises to get married. Bob even told Jane, "If we ever get married, you'll give birth to my child." Bob kept emphasizing that Jane was the one who initiated things, but his comments also fueled the flame. This hurt me even more. We've been married for only a year, and we don't have children yet. Meanwhile, Bob is making promises of marriage with a young coworker and even thinking about having a baby with her. I broke down crying in front of Bob and Natalie. Natalie comforted me, while Bob looked around nervously.
But it's strange, how did Lily know just by looking at the picture that Bob buried a baby plush in the mountains?
After crying my heart out, I muttered, "Maybe that child has some mysterious powers," Natalie agreed. Bob looked puzzled. But he didn't have the courage to ask Natalie and me for details and once again looked defeated. It was getting late, so Bob and I returned to our apartment. Once home, Bob and I sat down to continue our conversation. "We've only been married for a year, and you have the audacity to betray me like this?" I glared at Bob and exclaimed,
"I'm sorry. But really, if she hadn't tempted me, I wouldn't have done this." "You have some nerve saying that. You were clearly enjoying yourself with that young woman."
Furious with Bob's excuses, I lashed out at him.
"Bob, you're terrible, but that Jane girl is just as bad. She knew you were married." "Well, she's been having a hard time at work and struggling." I was flabbergasted by Bob's attempt to defend Jane. "So, because she seemed troubled, you thought you'd console her and get all cozy in your car? I've been concerned for a while. You've been coming home late, and I've noticed you on your phone till the early hours. I pretended to be asleep, but I knew you were constantly texting someone,"
I said loudly to Bob. He looked down, remaining silent.
"For starters, I'm telling my parents and yours about this."
When I said this, Bob started to panic.
"It's only right to tell our parents. My sister already knows, so I can't keep this a secret."
I exposed Bob's affair to both our parents. Soon, both sets of parents stormed into our home, berating Bob.
"How dare you have an affair just a year into your marriage? Shelby deserves better. What were your wedding vows? You promised to make our daughter happy, but you betrayed her so easily."
My parents vehemently rebuked Bob. Even more so, Bob's parents were livid.
"We never thought you'd be such a disgrace. You're the shame of the Roberts family." "That's right. Don't even think about coming home. More importantly, we're so sorry, Shelby. To think you're still newlyweds. It's utterly embarrassing having a son like this."
Bob's parents then apologized to me again.
"Hey, what are you waiting for? Bob, apologize too."
"I'm truly sorry." With tears streaming down his face, Bob said this after being berated by both sets of parents.
"You have a wonderful wife like Shelby, and yet you do this. We're cutting ties with you, Bob. Got it?"
After being thoroughly scolded and everyone left, Bob collapsed on the floor.
"Bob, I want a divorce,"
I stated firmly.
"You probably want to marry Jane and have kids with her. I'll gladly divorce someone like you." I admit I texted about marriage and kids, but that wasn't my real intention. I just wanted to make her happy in the moment. The one I truly love is you, Shelby. Huh? Hearing that just made me dislike you even more,
I said coldly, leaving Bob with a bewildered look. There's no way I would be swayed by such words.
I can't trust you anymore. I want a divorce. Please, reconsider. I never really wanted to marry Jane. It was just a fling.
Bob, having betrayed me, was now desperately trying to make amends.
Can you show me where you buried the baby doll?
The long weekend ended, and it was Bob's day to go to work. I had to work too, but I took the day off.
Excuse me, my husband works here. Thank you for always taking care of him.
I loudly greeted everyone as I entered the office building. That was Bob's workplace. Everyone there was staring at me, completely taken aback. No wonder, as I was holding a stuffed baby toy covered in dirt. The sight was so bizarre that the employees were frozen in shock with wide eyes. Every step I took, dirt from the stuffed toy fell onto the office floor. Bob, his face ashen, hurriedly approached me. Yesterday, I had Bob guide me to the mountain where the stuffed toy was buried. And in front of me, I had him dig up that stuffed baby toy. The toy was in a large bag, but as we dug it up with a shovel, the bag tore, getting the toy dirty. Last night, I had thought of using this toy somehow to take revenge on the two of them. And what I came up with was this plan, to barge into the office holding this dirt-covered stuffed baby toy. Bob, never expecting me to show up at the office with the toy, seemed utterly panicked. My husband has been having an affair with a junior colleague, Jane, I said. Upon saying this, all the employees focused their attention on one woman. It was Jane, Bob's affair partner. Jane, like Bob, turned pale and looked down in sheer embarrassment. He told me that they would bury this stuffed toy until they got married, and once their dream came true, they would dig it up together, I said. I could hear whispers of disbelief from the employees, saying things like, "No way. That's so creepy, and sounds like a horror story."
But what I don't get is why he would tell me something like this while he's cheating on me with Jane,
I said, and then played a video on my phone. Bob's voice echoed loudly.
Please, reconsider. I never really intended to marry her. She was just a fling.
After the video finished playing, Jane, who had been looking down just moments before, sharply raised her head, her expression furious. Just a fling? Bob, what does that mean? She demanded.
No, it's not like that.
Bob stammered, lost for words.
You promised to break up with your wife and marry me. You even said you wanted me to have your baby.
Jane yelled. The employees were once again shocked by her words, and a commotion broke out.
Here you go.
I handed the dirt-covered stuffed baby toy to Jane. Then I handed Bob a divorce attorney's business card.
We're getting divorced. From now on, let's communicate through the attorney.
Overwhelmed by my determination, Bob silently took the card.
I apologize for the commotion, everyone. I've finished my business here, so I'll be on my way,
said to Bob and Jane.
I wish you two all the happiness.
With that, I left Bob's office. I brushed the dirt off my clothes as I walked away. Later, I heard that both Bob and Jane confessed to their affair when questioned by their superiors. Concerned about the company's image, they were both promptly fired. Jane was furious upon being called just a fling. She transitioned from a timid new employee to a woman filled with rage. After I moved out of our shared apartment, Jane forcefully moved in with Bob. Bob was threatened by Jane, "You never know what I might do." He had no choice but to do as she said. Bob was fired from his job and tried to find another, but Jane forbade him from talking to other women. Bob was fed up with Jane, but given her unpredictable nature, he reluctantly complied. Bob ended up working at a construction site with only men, putting in hard labor every day. Jane took away Bob's freedom, constantly checking his smartphone as if monitoring him. She probably feared someone else would snatch Bob from her, just as she had done. Not only was Bob burdened with paying the rent for the apartment and living expenses, but he was also pressed with paying me compensation for the emotional distress he caused. I had also demanded compensation from Jane for the same reasons. She seemed to have started working multiple part-time jobs, But she kept getting fired, hopping from one job to the next. The lawyer who helped with the compensation issue had a chance to meet with Bob. That's when he learned about the miserable life of Bob and Jane and reported back to me. After the divorce, I moved back to my parents' home. My workplace was within commuting distance from home, so I continued with my job as before. Living at home meant I had many more opportunities to see not just my parents, but also Natalie and Lily. Natalie genuinely sympathized with me, offering words of encouragement.
"Shelby, you've been through a lot. You're still young, you'll surely find someone better." "I hope so." But thanks to Lily's mysterious power, I was able to part ways with that awful man quickly.
I genuinely felt that way. It was a silver lining that I got divorced from such a man so quickly. I felt like Lily, with her mysterious power, was a lifesaver. I hope to someday meet an honest man and get married. And I'd like to have and raise children. For that time, I'm gonna work hard and save money now. With such thoughts, I'm living each day with a positive attitude. Having lost my husband, I was living alone. My son and his wife pressured me to live with them, and I casually agreed. However, they dumped all the household chores on me, didn't look after their son, Ethan, and wouldn't contribute to the household expenses. Then one day, after leaving Ethan in their care to attend my nephew's wedding, I came home to find Ethan collapsed in a hot room. Fortunately, Ethan was okay, but I was furious and called my eldest son, Mark.
"Where the hell are you two? We're on vacation."
I was speechless at their cheerful response. "He's always underfoot. Always crying."
"I mean, we're being such good kids, aren't we? Letting you live with your grandson and even letting you take care of him. You should be more grateful, don't you think?"
That's right. I clenched my fist at Jessica's smug comment. Looking at Ethan's sweet sleeping face, I made a vow. I'll take matters into my own hands for you. Mark, Jessica, just wait and see. My name is Karen, a 55-year-old housewife. I was devastated last year by the death of my husband, who was 10 years my senior, due to illness. Even though we had an age gap, we were very close.
"Let's watch movies or go to museums together once I retire."
But that dream never came true. I felt lost thinking about how to spend the second half of my life alone. That's when Mark called me with the suggestion to live together. However, I wasn't overjoyed. Mark, during his teens, was busy dating multiple girls and not focusing on his studies, leading to constant arguments with my strict husband. After high school, he declared he was gonna live with his girlfriend and left home, cutting off all contact. Even when my husband was in the terminal stage of cancer, we couldn't get in touch with him. He only made it to the wake thanks to a call from a close nephew. So, I was naturally cautious when Mark called after such a long time. "Mom, it's been a while. You doing okay even without Dad around?" "I guess. Must be lonely living all by yourself, right? If we live with you, it'll be more lively. It might distract you a bit." Didn't I mention it at the funeral? That I got married with my girlfriend?
I didn't hear that.
At my husband's funeral, once the service was over, Mark went over to chat with the nephews, so I hardly spoke with him. Her name's Jessica. She couldn't come last time because Ethan had a fever. I couldn't believe that the mischievous Mark I knew was now a father. I felt quite moved. "I'll bring my son along, so why not live together?" His casual tone struck me as odd. "You must be feeling lonely living by yourself, right? I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm only 55. I still have the energy to work full-time. If you live with us, Jessica can help you with the household chores." I did find that appealing. Despite feeling young at heart, I'm still 55. I can feel my energy waning day by day. We can try it out at first. If it doesn't work, we can stop living together.
"Well, maybe we could give it a try."
On the other side of the call, I could hear a woman's excited voice. It seems to be Jessica, Mark's wife.
"Oh, mother-in-law? Hi there, it's Jessica."
Jessica, taking over the call, greeted me in a sweet voice.
"We're moving in tomorrow. So glad. Our apartment lease ends this month. Wait, tomorrow? All right then, see you.
She hung up abruptly. Caught off guard by this sudden turn of events, I murmured to myself while holding my cell phone. Well, if it doesn't work out, we can always stop living together. I do want to see my grandson. But this turned out to be the beginning of several challenges. Once we started living together, I was taken aback by the selfishness of my son and his wife. I had assumed Mark, with a wife and child, would be responsibly employed, but he was job hopping. He had a string of excuses like, "The work environment doesn't suit me," or "The new guy's too arrogant," and had switched jobs 8 times in just 4 years of marriage. To think that Jessica supports Mark, and yet she's been a stay-at-home mother simply because she finds working a hassle. Even after moving in with me, she seems to just laze around all day, watching TV or playing on her phone. Since I work full-time, I thought it'd be helpful if she could pitch in with some chores, so I asked Jessica for help. But even though she agreed in a heartbeat, when I come home, dishes were still left in the sink, and the bathtub still had water in it. Even if there's a sudden downpour, the laundry isn't brought in and is left outside to become damp. When I pointed this out, Jessica got defensive.
I wasn't just playing around. I'm busy taking care of a 2-year-old.
Yet, the living room floor is littered with empty snack wrappers and crumbs, and Ethan's diaper is bulging. To make matters worse, there was no sign that Ethan had lunch, and he clung to my leg as soon as he saw me.
Grandma, I'm hungry. Can I have some food?
Huh? Jessica, didn't you feed him lunch? Well, there's no frozen rice or instant curry.
You expect me to go shopping with a toddler?
I was flabbergasted. The supermarket is just a 5-minute walk away. There was an empty cup noodle container in the sink. She must have eaten that herself. What kind of parent does that? I was furious. From then on, I started preparing sandwiches and other lunches that Ethan could eat before I left for work. I reported this to Mark, but he's head over heels for Jessica, so he just chuckled and took her side.
Mom, Jessica is tired too. Taking care of a 2-year-old ain't easy, you know.
Come to think of it, I've never seen you change Ethan's diaper or play with him. I'm always the one giving him baths.
I always appreciate everything you do, Mom.
Despite their usual negligence, when my son and his wife were annoyed, they would scold Ethan.
You made me forget to save my game. Didn't I tell you to stay quiet in bed? Why are you getting up? I'm watching my show.
When they yelled, and Ethan started crying, they would glare and shout,
Quiet down!
Each time, I would wipe away Ethan's tears and smile gently at him. Granny will read you a storybook. I'll stay with you till you fall asleep.
Okay.
As time passed, whenever I was about to leave for work, Ethan would look at me with a sad face and seem to prefer staying by my side more than with his parents. He's not a cute kid at all. Mark and Jessica became more irritated by this. One day, I received an invitation to my nephew's wedding. Son of my younger sister, Susan, is having a wedding. I couldn't take 2-year-old Ethan with me, so I asked Mark to babysit. Surprisingly, he agreed right away. I've got work till noon, so I can't attend. Jessica and I will watch Ethan at home. Say hi to Aunt Susan for me. When I called Susan, she sounded disappointed. Well, work is work. Can you make it, sis? Yes, let's grab a coffee afterward. The day before the wedding, I reminded Jessica. After the ceremony, I'm gonna stop by a cafe with my sister, so I'll be back in the evening. Here's some money to buy lunch. As I handed Jessica a $100 bill while she was lounging on the couch, she quickly put aside the ticket she was gazing, her eyes lighting up.
Okay, thank you.
It seemed strange to me, a grandmother, having to ask my daughter-in-law to look after my grandson. Nonetheless, I headed to the wedding. The newlyweds looked so fresh and happy, and I felt blessed by their happiness. However, while at the cafe with Susan, as we chatted about our children, I had an uneasy feeling. I soon realized the cause of my unease. Last night, what Jessica hastily hid was 2 airplane tickets. Were they planning to leave, abandoning little Ethan? I finished my tea, told Susan. I'll call again. And hurried home. Upon opening the front door, the house was eerily quiet. Mark and Jessica's usual sneakers were lined up in the entrance, alongside Ethan's tiny shoes. I took off my heels and, looking down the hall, noticed the living room door wide open. Having the air conditioning on like that is pointless. But then again, even though the AC was running, the hallway felt unusually warm. Entering the living room with a sinking feeling, I found Ethan lying down, the room as hot as a sauna.
Ethan!
I grabbed the AC remote from the floor and turned it on. Stripping Ethan's clothes off, I applied cold packs and all the ice packs I had from the freezer to his neck and underarms. Luckily, it seemed Ethan was just asleep.
Granny, welcome back!
His innocent smile brought me to my knees. I helped Ethan drink some sports drink, changed his sweat-soaked clothes, and took him to the hospital just to be sure. He was diagnosed with no heat stroke, and I felt a sigh of relief. Back home, once things had settled down, I asked Ethan.
Ethan, where did Mommy and Daddy go? Not sure.
Ethan tilted his head adorably.
Mommy told me that Granny would be back soon and to be a good boy. So, I was good.
His sparkling eyes made my heart ache. I knelt down and hugged Ethan, saying softly, Ethan, you're always a good boy. But you're only 2, so it's okay to be a little selfish sometimes.
I'm gonna be 3 soon.
That's right, we'll celebrate. After giving Ethan a bath and putting him to bed, I called Mark, struggling to keep my irritation in check.
What's wrong, Mom?
Without missing a beat, I yelled at Mark.
Are you out of your mind? Leaving a 2-year-old home alone? He was drenched in sweat and passed out.
Huh? I had the AC on. He must have messed with the button and turned it off. Mark didn't even seem to be concerned about Ethan's condition. Makes me wonder if he's really a father.
So, where the hell are you 2 now? We're on a trip.
Jessica chimed in cheerfully, leaving me speechless.
Excuse me? We're in Guam. The blue ocean and white sandy beaches are so beautiful.
We never had our honeymoon. Figured Ethan would be okay till evening. He gets in the way, always crying.
Speaking of which, we've been pretty darn good to you, haven't we? Letting you live with your grandson and even having you care for him. You could be a bit more grateful if you ask me.
That's right. Their irresponsible remarks made me clench my fists.
You do know Ethan's birthday is in 4 days? You'll be back by then, right?
Oh, totally forgot about that. Just buy him a toy or a cake or something. We'll be back over the weekend.
Fine, I'll do that. Thanks, take care.
After hanging up, I quietly made my way to the bedroom. Opening the door, I saw Ethan sound asleep, cuddling his teddy bear. Looking at his angelic face, I made a vow. Ethan, I just can't forgive your parents. I'll make sure they pay. Mark, Jessica, just you wait and see. What kind of punishment should I impose on these 2, so oblivious to their roles as parents? After a restless night fueled by anger, I called my workplace the next morning and took 5 days off. I needed to efficiently get things done before my son and his wife returned. I searched online for several realtors, and by the afternoon, an agent came over to appraise the house. Though 20 years old, we renovated the bathrooms 5 years ago. Located on the southeast corner with a yard and parking space, and just a 5-minute drive to the train station. Given the favorable conditions, every company gave us a good offer. We desperately paid off the loan taken out under my husband's name with both of us working, and right after we finished paying it, my husband passed away. My son and his wife moved in and dumped their child and house chores on me, acting as if they owned the place. I'm sure they'll kick me out when I get old and take over this house. It's a house that I love with memories of my husband, but it'd be better to sell it to a complete stranger than let those 2 ruin it. While waiting for a buyer for the house, I decided to get the locks changed. They said they could do it right away, and shortly after I called, the locksmith arrived and had everything done in 2 hours. I couldn't help but chuckle imagining my son and his wife panicking outside, unable to get in. I called Susan and told her everything, and she was livid on the other end of the phone.
Listen, I hate to ask, but can Ethan and I stay with you until we find a place? Of course, we'll pitch in for food and utilities.
Why are you being so formal? Just bring Ethan over to my place. I've been divorced and my husband's gone. My son's moved out after getting married. I've got plenty of space.
Yeah, sorry it's so sudden. Thank you.
I was genuinely grateful for Susan's kindness. The problem was Ethan. After Ethan woke up from his nap, I prepared a slice of watermelon and a tablet for him to watch some cartoons, and casually asked him, "Hey,
what's up?
How'd you feel about living with Grandma at Aunt Susan's?" Ethan, wide-eyed, took a moment before responding.
I won't see Mommy and Daddy anymore?
You can see them whenever you want, Ethan. We just won't live with them.
Okay then, that's fine.
Ethan agreed, more easily than I expected.
You'll be with me, right, Grandma?
Of course, sweetheart. Ethan beamed at me and resumed his cartoon as if nothing had happened. I quietly sighed in relief. I wasn't sure how much Ethan understood about the situation, but he might have sensed his parents' neglect. A fresh wave of anger rose in me towards my son and his wife for making a 2-year-old go through this. Afterwards, I contacted a moving company for an estimate, packed our belongings and furniture, and moved to Susan's house. With Susan's help, I finished unpacking. Once everything was in order, we celebrated Ethan's 3rd birthday. We decorated with origami and dollar store items, and celebrated with a homemade cake and chicken fried rice. It was a simple celebration, but Ethan's eyes sparkled with joy.
Wow, Grandma, Aunt Susan, thank you.
Ethan, I know you love trains but didn't have any. Hope you like this one. When Susan and I handed over a train track set, Ethan jumped for joy and immediately started assembling it. Sis, do you think he's never received a gift before? Whispering Susan made me frown.
The storybooks and toys I gave him for his birthday and Christmas are nowhere to be found. Maybe Mark and Jessica sold them online.
The only items Ethan brought with him when he moved were a sandbox set, some clothes, a teddy bear, and a few storybooks. It seemed too little for his age. While Ethan and I were connecting tunnels and bridges, I got a call from Mark. I ignored the ring for a while and then moved to the next room to answer it. Mark's voice sounded almost tearful.
Mom, what's going on? My key doesn't work. You changed the locks. You're so sly.
Jessica also shouted on the phone.
Open the door now. Why are we being kicked out of our own house? It's my house. You guys just barged in and stayed. You agreed to live together. If you didn't like it, you should have said so. I couldn't, seeing how Ethan was treated.
I replied in a firm tone.
If Ethan is such a bother to you, then give him to me. I'll raise him properly. And from now on, I'm gonna live with Susan, so you guys can move wherever you like.
What?
That's too sudden. It was you who came over the day after I called, wasn't it?
I snapped back at the complaining couple.
Well, I want to get back to our conversation properly.
Give me a sec. After hanging up the phone, I made a call to a certain place and then headed home. When I got back to my dimly lit house, Mark and Jessica were waiting out front. They sat on their suitcases, looking tired and yawning. As I opened the gate, Mark raised his voice in annoyance.
You're so late. How long were you gonna make us wait?
Yeah, I'm opening it now. I could let this rude remark slide with a smile, thinking it was just for today. Jessica looked puzzled at the large brown envelope I was carrying, but I pretended not to notice and unlocked the door. Turning on the living room AC, my son and his wife, as arrogant as always, said to me, "Man, I'm beat. Mom, get me a cold beer. And some pepperoni. I'll have a lemon cocktail, and bring some cheese too." Casually they sat on the couch, stretching out their legs and fanning their collars as if ordering me around was a given. Even when I brought them their drinks along with my iced tea, they popped open their cans without a word of thanks.
By the way, you mentioned selling this house earlier. I didn't hear anything about it.
I replied calmly to Mark's irritated tone. I own this place. I can do whatever I want. Come on, normally you'd consult with the people living with you. Kicking us out just like that? That's not cool, mother-in-law. I don't need lectures from someone who leaves a 2-year-old behind to go on vacation. My son and his wife went silent, their faces darkening. How can a parent do such a thing? Oh, I guess it's not a big deal for you, Mark.
What's that supposed to mean?
You're not Ethan's real dad, right? Jessica froze. Mark glared at me.
What the hell are you talking about?
It's exactly as I said. Ethan's real dad is this guy, isn't it, Jessica? Looking at the photo I took out of the envelope, Jessica went pale. She snatched the photo, crumpled it, and stuffed it into her purse. I just smiled. I have plenty more where that came from. So, I guess I hit the nail on the head. How did you? Ethan told me, saying that apparently he has another dad. That blabbermouth. Jessica clicked her tongue in annoyance. You leave Ethan at the daycare once a month after having dinner and go on a date? Even though you never mentioned it before? I thought it was strange for you to dine out, so I hired a private investigator. Turns out, it's an old coworker from your part-time job. Mark's eyes widened in shock.
Hey, what the hell is this?
Visibly panicked, Jessica finally seemed to come to terms with the situation and apologized to Mark. I'm sorry. I was dating 2 of you. I recognized Ethan immediately from his pictures when that guy was younger. He looks just like the guy. But that guy has a wife, so I said Ethan was your child. As she rapidly tried to justify herself, Mark froze in shock. After we decided to get married, I broke up with him, but he said he'd give child support if he got to see Ethan. Come on, I gotta get that money, right? Oh, and I really didn't want to see him.
What are you even saying?
I nodded in agreement with Mark's response. No wonder, the photos I laid out on the table all showed Jessica smiling brightly, arm in arm with the man, or happily holding hands, entering what looked like a hotel. You know, if you have complaints, maybe you should earn more. Jessica pouted. It's 'cause you're on such a low salary, Mark. Aren't you embarrassed being a part-timer at 30?
What? Don't act all high and mighty, housewife. Plus, you're probably using that child support to buy all those designer brands. I don't want to hear it from someone who only thinks about themselves.
I looked on at the bickering couple with a cold stare. I had this suspicion shortly after they moved in. I was worried about the words Ethan had let slip, so I hired an investigator. Now I knew why Jessica would take Ethan out whenever Mark was working nights. Initially, I decided to keep it to myself because I didn't want to destroy Ethan's family. But after the recent trip, I realized having a couple like my son and his wife raise Ethan would only lead to his unhappiness. As Jessica stubbornly tried to justify herself, Mark laughed bitterly.
Ha, I've been raising another man's child for these past 3 years. Raising? When have you ever changed his diapers or given him a bath? Shut up. We're getting a divorce right now.
Jessica glared at me with fiery eyes.
This is all because you had to snoop around, mother-in-law. If you'd kept quiet, none of this would have come to light. Were you planning to hide it if no one found out? You're such a terrible woman.
Mark yelled at Jessica.
You just wanted to take it easy, didn't you? Deciding to live together to save on expenses and then dumping all the housework and childcare on my mom. Must be nice to just laze around all day.
Mark, you sure act all high and mighty, but are you in any position to criticize Jessica? I said with a hint of sarcasm, and Mark snapped back at me.
Excuse me? You got a problem?
No, I just thought you might be putting yourself on a pedestal. From the brown envelope, I pulled out the remaining investigation report and photos. Jessica's gaze fell upon them. Jessica's expression quickly changed. I heard you were fired after the manager warned you about touching a high school girl at a burger place? You said you quit because the atmosphere didn't suit me. Hey, don't twist my words like that. Mark retorted with a disgruntled look on his face. I just poked her on the cheek, stroked her hair, and hugged her from behind.
I didn't touch her breasts or anything. She's overreacting.
Ew, gross.
Jessica struck a pose of hugging herself and distanced herself from Mark. If you touch someone without their consent, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I just touched because they were cute. If cheeks and hair aren't okay, where is? Nowhere, of course. Jessica snapped. What is a 30-year-old man doing with a high school girl? If you want to do that kind of thing, go to a nightclub. It's cool because they are a first-time, normal high school girl. You womans wouldn't understand. Puffing out his chest, Mark looked defiant. I held my forehead and took a deep sigh. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw a picture of Mark hugging a high school girl's shoulder, but he probably didn't mean any harm since he took a selfie and posted it on the internet. Hey, don't look at me funny, both of you. All men like teenage girls, don't they? All right, let's just get a divorce then. Jessica said, shaking her head in exhaustion. Why don't you marry a teenager next time? Not that they'd want you, though. Fine, I will. If we're done here, please gather your belongings. Decide on your next move as soon as possible. Until then, I'll allow you to store your stuff here. I pulled out some leftover cardboard boxes from a recent move and placed them in front of my son and his wife. Without a word, Jessica began to methodically pack her clothes and bags into the boxes. Mark, grumbling all the while, started to pack as well. Once they seemed to have everything in order, I made a call on my cell. Sorry to keep you waiting. Please come in. Soon, the front door opened, revealing two men in button-down shirts. My son and his wife, looking bewildered, were shown police badges. You're Mark Smith and Jessica Smith, correct? Yes, that's us. We've received a report of child abandonment. You're under arrest. What? The officer sternly questioned them. You two went on a trip to Guam until yesterday, leaving your 2-year-old son at home, correct? Yes, but seriously? We're getting arrested for that? We just went on a little honeymoon trip. We'll discuss this at the station. Of course, I was the one who reported them. A few days in jail might make them reflect on their actions. Watching the two of them hang their heads and get into the police car, I whispered to myself. Mark and Jessica were released on probation 3 days later. It was probably the first time they had left Ethan alone at home. They had prepared meals for him. They had anticipated that I would return home in the evening, which likely contributed to their leniency, expecting it to be just a short period he'd be alone. From now on, I agreed to take care of Ethan. We arranged this agreement through a lawyer, ensuring the penalty when he fails to follow the agreement. Mark, who moved into a rundown 2-bedroom apartment, apparently can't afford his own living expenses. He probably couldn't manage living by his own. It turned out both of them were in debt and seemingly had plans to eventually burden me with their financial responsibilities. Since their plans fell through, Mark took on more part-time jobs, and Jessica reluctantly started working too. The two of them worked from the crack of dawn until late at night without rest, and I heard they constantly fought at home. My house quickly found a buyer, and a young couple moved in. They seemed very pleasant when they came for a viewing, so I'm sure they'll take good care of the place. I was worried Ethan might miss his parents, but for now, he's living life to the fullest. In fact, without Jessica and Mark scolding him or treating him coldly, there's no need for him to always be on his best behavior. He's become more innocent and cheerful. He's grown very attached to Susan and behaves just as a child his age should, occasionally keeping us on our toes with his whims. I switched to a reduced work schedule to spend more time with Ethan. Susan, who works in a 24-hour daycare from 6 p.m., and I have divided up household chores and always make sure our busy schedules don't impact Ethan. If Ethan ever wants to see his parents, I intend to let him. While losing my husband felt like a gaping hole in my heart, I found a new purpose in seeing Ethan grow up properly. Susan and I want to shower him with love and raise him together. At 2 a.m., my phone on the bedside table rang. The screen lit up with the name Amy. Concerned about a call at such an hour, I quickly answered. Hello, Amy? But it wasn't my daughter Amy on the line, it was Lily. Mom's crying, please help,
she said, her voice shaking, as if she was about to cry herself.
Dad hit Mom and left.
Confused and alarmed, I hurriedly got dressed and jumped into my car. Entering the living room, I found Amy slumped on the floor, crying. Lily, who had tried her best not to cry over the phone, was now sobbing uncontrollably, her eyes and nose bright red, as she opened the door for me. "It's nothing serious," Amy said, her cheeks swollen and red.
What happened?
Well, listening to Amy's story, I felt a chill down my spine. Holding the crying Lily close and stroking her head, I softly spoke.
The next one who's gonna be on the floor crying will be John.
My name is Michelle, 57 years old. I lost my husband 2 years ago, and now I live alone. My joys in life are visiting my daughter and son-in-law's place, which is a 30-minute drive away, watching my 4-year-old granddaughter Lily grow up, and trading stocks, something my husband taught me. As I trade, I often consult my husband in my heart. Should I sell this stock now? Or should I wait a bit more? I feel like I can hear him advising me to hold on or to sell now. Strangely, when I follow that advice, I often profit. My daughter Amy is 29. She got married 5 years ago, and since Lily's birth, she's been a stay-at-home mother. Her husband John is a salesman. I used to think salesmen were well-paid elites, but apparently not. It seems John doesn't make much, and Amy started working from home as a writer last year. They rent a single-family home, which isn't cheap. Yet, juggling childcare, house chores, and writing seems challenging, and she hasn't been producing much work. That's because John wouldn't compromise on anything related to the house. If it's not cleaned up to his standards, he would complain. He won't tolerate any shortcuts in cooking, so apparently Amy can't use store-bought meals. Between housework and cooking, even with all the effort she puts into working from home, she only manages to make about $300 a month. That's why I help my daughter out financially every month. It's just money I made from my hobbies. If it helps my darling daughter and granddaughter, then I think it's worth it. Men have their pride, so I told Amy to just keep it a secret from John. John seems to be really busy at his job, and it doesn't pay well. When I visited, he would often take a quick shower and leave right after discussing something with Amy in the upstairs room. John, being a salesman sure seems tough. I need to prepare materials for tomorrow. It's work, so I can't help it. He looked like he was doing his best without complaining. I'm sorry to leave while you're here. I'll be back soon. I watched as John left in his suit and murmured with a sigh. I worry he's gonna wear himself out. At that, Amy gave a wry smile. She looked a bit discontented. I peered into Amy's face. Are you upset because he didn't get to eat the meal you prepared? No, it's not that. He said it's work, so it can't be helped. Amy replied with a hint of reluctance. If both your dad and mom are busy, and you feel lonely, just call Grandma, okay? This picture with Lily shows Grandma, I said, pointing at my icon, and set up Amy's phone so Lily could call me. I had her call me multiple times to make sure she knew how. I thought if I could be someone for her to talk to when she's feeling lonely, it would be good. I never expected this to come in handy in such an unexpected way. At 2 a.m., my phone, which was by my bedside, rang. Groggily, I searched for it. Wondering who would call at this time, I saw Amy's name lit up. Worried something might have happened, I quickly answered. Hello? Amy? But it wasn't my daughter Amy on the phone.
Grandma, Mom's crying. Help!
Lily's voice, on the verge of tears, desperately reached out to me. I was confused and didn't know how to respond.
Dad hit Mom and left.
I thought I misheard. He hit her? Dad did that to Mom?
Yes, please help.
Lily pleaded again. Can you put Mom on the phone?
No. Mom won't respond, no matter what I say.
I quickly changed and jumped in my car. Arriving at their house, I rang the doorbell, and Lily opened the door. Over the phone, she had tried her best to hold back her tears, but now her eyes and nose were red from crying. She must have been terrified during those 30 minutes before I arrived. Where's Mom?
Over there.
She pointed towards the living room. I patted Lily's head. As I walked down the hallway, with Lily hiccuping behind me. Entering the living room, I found Amy slouched on the floor, crying. Her disheveled hair and the sight of her covering her face with one hand crying didn't just unsettle Lily, it disturbed me as well. Amy, what happened? I gave her a gentle shake, and she looked up, startled. Mom. She murmured, looking dazed, seemingly not understanding why I was there. Where did he hit you? Show me. I gently moved her hand away. The cheek she had been covering was red and swollen. Amy let out a whimper and covered it again. It was just a slap. It's not a big deal. But Amy's voice trembled as she said it. I couldn't possibly think it wasn't a big deal. Even if it was just a marital spat, I couldn't believe he would hit her hard enough to cause that kind of swelling. What happened? I wet a towel and pressed it to Amy's face. Well, I never told you before, Mom, but it seems like John's been cheating. Cheating? Yeah, he told you he was going back to work the other day, but he actually demanded money from me. How could going back to work require so much money? I don't know, but suspecting him of cheating just because of that. I accidentally saw the notification on his phone, and the messages were from a woman with sweet words. He's demanded money several times before. That's why I refused today. And then he hit you? Yes. And he almost hit Lily too when she tried to stop him. I stepped in, and in the end, he took money from my purse and left. Listening to Amy's story, I felt a chill run through my heart as my eyes widened in shock. What shocked me the most was that John tried to hit Lily. I've been wondering if I can continue living with a man like that. Lily, clutching my sleeve tightly, suddenly burst into tears, probably recalling the traumatic moment. I was livid. Cheating was one thing, but laying a hand on family was downright despicable. I wanted to shout at him.
Isn't it a father's duty to protect his family?
But preaching to him wouldn't make a dent. If a lecture could reform him, he would have come to his senses the moment he tried to hit Lily and would already be showing remorse. Holding a sobbing Lily close and stroking her head, I said calmly.
Next time, it's gonna be John who's crying on the floor.
What? I smiled and nodded at Amy, who looked at me anxiously. Can you stay with John a bit longer? I'll move in with you. We'll buy a voice recorder and record all your conversations with him. But what if he demands money again? He might try to hit Lily. Record it when he asks for money. It's okay to give him the money. I'll always be with Lily. We need to gather evidence, after all. As long as Lily's safe, I'm okay with it. Amy nodded with the determined face of a mother. Then, I took a picture of Amy's face with my smartphone. The swelling would serve as evidence. The next day, I packed up my things and went over to Amy and her family's house. It seems Amy isn't feeling too well, so I'm gonna stay for a while and help with household chores and take care of Lily. At my sudden arrival, John looked surprised and had a guilty expression on his face. We can't trouble you like this, Michelle. I can help around the house and with Lily. His charming nature, typical of a salesman, I suppose. Lily's quite active, you know. I'd hate to see you get worn out. He said, showing genuine concern. That's okay. What I'm really worried about is whether the lunch I make will be enough for you. But keep it a secret from Amy. If you're still hungry, use this to buy something. I discreetly handed John $200. He scratched his head and said, Gosh, I feel kinda bad about this. But he put the money in his pocket anyway. He couldn't object to me staying now. From that day on, whenever John came home, I decided to stay in Lily's room and play with her for at least an hour. I try to always be with Lily and even take a bath with her. This was to give John a chance to talk to Amy without being wary of me. We're all done now. As soon as we finished taking shower, John would say with a smile. Guess it's my turn then. Take your time. On the surface, I got along with John, but as soon as he stepped into the bathroom, I checked in with Amy. Did he say anything?
He did. He thought it was odd when you suddenly decided to live with us. So, he asked me if you had said something.
Amy giggled before continuing. John asked me if I had said anything to you, so I told him about you hitting me yesterday. He went silent, so I said, I wouldn't dare say something like that.
And then what did he say?
Don't tell her about it, or I'll hit you again. He didn't realize I was recording, so he dug his own grave. Seeing Amy laugh like that was reassuring. She seemed like a completely different person from last night. I hope my presence here can be of some encouragement. Amy and I nodded in agreement. First things first. The next evening, while John was in the bath, what we did was check his messages. We were looking for signs of an affair, but to our astonishment, John seemed to have relationships with several women. He has a child, yet he still does this? Amy voiced her disgust under her breath. If he was cheating with women like this a lot, no amount of money, even if he's rich, would ever be enough.
Let's meet up. Maybe hit that hotel again. Yesterday was awesome.
While slowly scrolling through these messages, I took a video of John's entire smartphone screen.
Hold on a minute. Is this?
Amy paused and stared intently at the screen. The chat showed the message. Come by my place again next week, Mr. Salesman. Dated from the previous week. Amy frowned at the message, especially at the heart emoji at the end of it.
So, he was hitting on clients too?
In sheer disbelief, words failed us. Looking up at the ceiling, we both let out a heavy sigh. The next day, we went for a legal consultation. A lawyer named Mr. Ramirez listened to our story attentively. He then told us that the video capturing the chat alone wouldn't suffice as solid evidence. He said that having pictures of them entering the hotel together, hotel receipts, or credit card statements would help. This message from last week. I paused the video we were watching, pointing to the message that read,
Come by my place again next week, Mr. Salesman.
So next week means this week, right? We might still catch them. We decided to hire a PI right away and asked him to investigate. The PI would look into John's activities during work hours, including how much time he spent at clients' places. 3 days later, the PI got back to us. After going through the report, we nodded in satisfaction. Fantastic, keep up the good work. We told the PI. Now that we had evidence of John's infidelity, we started planning a trap for him at home. I withdrew $50,000, some of the money I had earned from stocks, from the bank. I then placed it in a dresser on the second floor of Amy's house. That dresser was in the guest room I'd been staying in. The dresser was practically empty already. While John was at work during the day, we had been moving our clothes and personal items to my house, readying ourselves for a quick move. With the drawers being empty, the money will certainly stand out. Neatly bundled $10,000 bills with bands will surely catch John's eye. I gave John $200 the other day. How long do you think that'll last him? I asked, to which Amy replied with a tilt of her head. It varies when he asks. But if he thinks you have money too, he might have already run out. Well, the timing might be just right then. We quietly closed the drawer with the $50,000. That night, as usual, I took a bath with Lily. Just as I began to undress, my phone rang. It was a call from Amy. I had asked her to call me if John ever asked her for money. I told Lily to wait a sec, and tiptoed up the stairs. Outside the room I was staying in, I eavesdropped. Money again? What are you spending it all on?
Shut up. Your mom might hear. Just give it to me.
You gonna hit me again? If you don't want to be hit, hand over the money. I'm in a hurry. I heard the sigh of Amy followed by the sound of the drawer opening. What the? Why do you have so much cash? Just as the drawer closed, I slid the room's door open. I'm sorry, Amy, John. I was about to take a bath but felt dizzy. Could I lie down for a bit?
Are you okay, Mom?
I laid down, and Amy immediately put a blanket over me. Even John, usually smug, clicked his tongue softly and left the room without a word. After a while, I heard John leaving through the front door. We need to hurry. We gathered the money from the dresser, took our belongings, and left Amy's house. The next day, John received a call from Mr. Ramirez, the lawyer. A date was set, and with Mr. Ramirez present, the divorce discussions began. And so, I dialed up John's office and said, "I have something important to discuss." I identified myself as John's mother-in-law and asked to speak with the manager. After conveying the matter, I requested they keep quiet about the conversation until the designated day and hung up. With that, everything was set. On the day of the discussion, John visited my house. I had told Lily to stay upstairs and not come down. John didn't hide his discontented face and, without greeting me, faced Amy and heavily sat down on the couch. Mr. Ramirez greeted him and handed over his business card. John hesitated for a moment before nodding in acknowledgement. "So, what's this about you wanting a divorce?" Facing Amy, John bluntly asked. "Yes, I want a divorce. Also, I'd like alimony for abuse and child support."
What? Are you kidding me? You leave the house saying you want a divorce out of the blue, and now you want alimony and child support? Mr. Ramirez, she's the one causing all this trouble.
He banged the table, glaring at Amy, and turned a frustrated face to Mr. Ramirez. "I have evidence of you cheating. And also of the physical abuse." She placed a photo on the table, taken by a private investigator, showing John and another woman exiting a hotel. Following that, I played an audio recording I had taken on my phone which had John admitting to the violence.
"Hey, you tricked me, huh? Recording sneaky stuff like this. Huh?"
He raised his voice and lunged at Amy, trying to grab her collar. Both Mr. Ramirez and I stepped in to stop him. "Calm down. If you get too aggressive, you might find yourself in legal trouble." After Mr. Ramirez's stern words, John calmed down and settled back into his seat. "While I'm trying to listen to both parties here, if this settlement doesn't proceed, Amy's considering filing for divorce or suing. She seems to have her evidence in order and doesn't seem to be backing down." Mr. Ramirez subtly urged John to be reasonable. Lost in thought, John finally spoke up, saying,
"But,"
in a loud voice,
"even if it was me who cheated, I still have the right to claim a share of the assets that Amy has, right?"
"Yes, if you make the claim," replied Mr. Ramirez.
"Then I'm claiming." "Too bad, Amy. I don't have any assets left. Hand over half of yours,"
John said smugly. Amy coolly responded, "I don't have any either."
"What?"
After a long stare at a stunned John, Amy spoke again. "I don't have any property or money."
"Liar. There was $50,000 in that drawer."
"Oh, that? That's mine." Upon hearing my words, John exclaimed,
"What?"
"You see, my mom has been helping me out every month. Even the money I gave to you was from her support. If you divorce Amy, I don't see any reason to help you anymore. In fact," I told John in a low voice, "I feel like pressing charges for you hitting my precious daughter." John turned pale. Unfortunately, it seemed more like the shock of not getting any money rather than my words that got to him. But we weren't about to let it end there. "And these?" Amy placed several more photographs on the table. They showed John visiting a house while on a sales call. "You were there for an hour and a half. Do sales calls usually take that long? What were you doing inside?" Upon hearing Amy's words, John snorted with laughter. "You know, sales involve explaining the product and stuff. Sometimes it takes long. I get asked questions."
"Oh really?"
Amy smirked and placed another picture.
"So, explaining the product means you gotta strip down to your underwear? Must have been a heck of an explanation."
In that picture, John stood by the window, shirtless. Through the sheer curtain, though he probably thought it concealed more than it did, a woman in lingerie, hugging John, was clearly visible. Her face was recognizable even through the lace. "Ugh." John choked on his words. Amy placed a sheet of A4 paper. "I had a detective keep an investigation going. This is a list of your mistresses." Compare this to your company's client list, and we'll know just how many customers you've been involved with. By now, John was rendered speechless. Just then, the doorbell rang. I stood up.
Perfect timing.
Hearing my words, John whispered, "No way." I thanked the person at the door and led them to the living room. Seeing the person, John screamed in horror.
Boss!
Clutching the photos and list from the table to his chest, John cowered on the carpeted floor.
I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I'll pay alimony, child support, anything. Please, please forgive me.
Amy and I exchanged glances inside. It's a shame, but you're too late. We've already made copies of everything. Amy and I presented the photos and list to the boss. As the boss went through them one by one, speechless, only John's sobbing echoed throughout the room. Unsurprisingly, John got fired. Moreover, he's lodged a claim for damages for cancellation of contracts by the company. The mistresses, too, are playing innocent, claiming they were tricked, seduced, or even forced by John alone. It's karma, I think. Of course, Amy's going after him for every penny in alimony and child support, using Mr. Ramirez as her representative. John couldn't pay everything he owed, and not even his rent. Rumor has it he was evicted from his home. Come to think of it, Amy mentioned seeing him doing some unfamiliar road construction work. He looked like he was about to cry as his younger co-workers yelled at him. As for us, the three of us live happily in my house. Amy started working. I look after Lily, but I don't find it hard at all. On the contrary, every day is fulfilling. Even though we live together, sometimes Lily calls with Amy's cell phone.
Love you, Grandma.
Hearing that cheerful voice always warms my heart. People say that money changes a person, but isn't it actually revealing their true nature? Looking at Mark in front of me, I couldn't help but think so.
With this much, I can quit my job and buy a house. Oh. Maybe I should take Mom and Dad on that trip they've always wanted to go on.
Even though it's the money I inherited from my father, Mark started to count his chickens as if it was his own. And in his plans, even my much disliked in-laws are included.
This is what my father left for me. You have no right to dictate how I should spend this money.
It was a cry from my heart. But Mark just snorted and laughed, waving his hand dismissively.
All your money is now mine. If you go against me, we're gonna divorce, you know.
That's classic Mark. He thinks if he says this, I'll just comply. He threatened me and then left the house. Things have changed now. It's not going to be the same anymore. I decided to start making some preparations while Mark was gone. My name is Lisa Harrison, 30 years old. Since graduating from community college, I've been working as a receptionist at a private clinic. I married Mark 3 years ago. I met Mark at a friend's wedding. At first, I was taken aback by his somewhat forceful approach, but there was a sense of relief since he was a friend of a friend, and before I knew it, we were dating and then got married.
I'm gonna make you happy.
It sounded a bit condescending, but I was genuinely happy. Back then, I dreamt of a happy married life. But I woke up from that dream pretty quickly. Before we got married, Mark and I would spend weekends at my place, just hanging out. That's why I didn't notice it. I never realized just how much of a mama's boy Mark was, or how much his parents doted on him.
My son's wife isn't a guest, you know.
I've heard that line so many times I'm sick of it. Every time I visit my in-laws, my mother-in-law keeps reminding me. It's not like I was lounging around or acting arrogant or anything. Ever since my mother-in-law pointed it out, I tried even harder to be considerate. Whenever I go to my in-laws' house, I quickly ask my mother-in-law if she needs my help, things like carrying something or wiping the table. It's more exhausting than my job. To be honest, my mother-in-law has never made coffee for me even once. Mark and my father-in-law, watching my efforts, just chuckle and are like, she still has a lot to learn. I was utterly fed up with all of them. If it was just a few times a year, maybe I could bear it. But with Mark, it's every week.
Before marrying Lisa, I lived with my parents, so I prioritized spending weekends with Lisa. But now that I live with Lisa, I need to prioritize my parents on the weekends.
Unfortunately, our apartment is only a 10-minute drive from his parents' house. So sometimes, Mark ends up at his parents' house even on weekdays. Moreover, the apartment we live in now was originally mine before we got married. We did get permission from the landlord, but it's quite cramped for two.
Hey, shouldn't we look for a bigger apartment?
I suggested this shortly after we got married, but his response gave me chills.
It'd cost money, and if we're gonna do that, why not just move in with my parents?
Spending 365 days in that in-laws house. Just thinking about it made me feel sick. Absolutely not. Since then, I've never brought up the idea of moving to Mark. It seems Mark senses my discomfort around my mother-in-law, and he often gets mad at me for it.
Sure, my mom might be a bit strict, but isn't that how moms are? Well, I guess you wouldn't know since you don't have a mother.
Whenever the topic of my parents came up, I always felt Mark was looking down on me. I was raised by my father. My mother passed away when I was little, so it was just my father who raised me. I once overheard my father, when he was drunk, saying he and my mother had run off together, leaving their families behind. So, I didn't have any close relatives to rely on. Moreover, my father was busy running his business. Actually, it was a housekeeper who took care of me. She was kind to me, but at the end of the day, she wasn't my real family. I've never been good at being openly affectionate, and that's carried through to this age.
It's such a pity, you know? If only Lisa's dad had been a bit more business savvy.
Mark said with a grin. I never liked discussing this topic, but for some reason, Mark occasionally brings it up, as if he's just remembered it. It's about my father's company went under. A few years ago, my father had to shut down the business he was running. I don't know all the details, but it probably failed due to mismanagement. This all happened around the time I decided to get married. Worried about my father, I was like, why don't we live together? I knew Mark wouldn't be thrilled about it, but I couldn't just abandon my father. In the end, though, my father chose to live on his own.
Just think about your happiness, Lisa. But Dad, seeing you happy is all that matters to me. Oh, and by the way, congratulations on your wedding.
His kind smile from that time is still fresh in my memory. I wished he could have met his grandchild, but unfortunately, we had trouble conceiving. 2 years after our wedding, my mother-in-law suggested I get a medical checkup, and I did. The results showed there was no problem on my end. So, there might be an issue with Mark. I proposed that he also get tested. Especially since it was hard hearing my mother-in-law constantly telling me I was useless because I couldn't give her a grandchild. But Mark was adamant about not doing it.
There's no way I'm gonna do that. We're not animals. It's embarrassing to even think about getting tested.
I felt cornered into the testing by his mother. I didn't really have a say in the matter. Mark knew that, and yet.
Please, Mark. If there's nothing wrong, we can be at ease. If there's an issue, we can address it. I just want to know. My mother-in-law's pressure is really getting to me.
Mark shook his head.
Wait, so you want me to get tested just because you feel pressured by my mom? That's not it. I just thought if there was a solution. Is there even a solution to a blessing like that? Probably, you just can't stand my mom's constant nagging. That's none of my business.
No matter how much I begged, Mark wouldn't go for the checkup. He knew the pressure and the constant nagging from my mother-in-law was getting to me. He didn't back me up. Whenever I tried to discuss it, he had brushed me off and was like, that's none of my business. My weekdays were filled with work and house chores, and weekends were visits to my in-laws' home. Those days kept going on, and I was completely worn out. I thought about getting divorced, but thinking of my father, I just couldn't go through with it. I couldn't betray my father, who wished for my happiness and was delighted with my marriage. A divorce wasn't an option. Maybe that's why Mark picked up on it. One day, Mark went to my in-laws' home alone and returned the next morning. It was unusual for Mark to visit his parents alone. I felt somewhat relieved, but also a bit suspicious. A few days later, I saw an incoming call from a girl on Mark's cell phone left on the table. Mark quickly hid it.
What's the hurry? Who's that? Nobody, just a friend. A friend? It's 1 a.m. Why would a woman call you at this time?
I knew of Mark's infidelity issues. This had happened many times before. As I pressed further, Mark replied with a hint of irritation.
Can you stop nagging? If you have a problem, let's just get a divorce.
Maybe I showing my vulnerability at that moment was a mistake. It probably gave Mark more power. At first, he only threatened me verbally, but eventually, he started mentioning divorce more often.
If you don't want a divorce, do as I say.
I felt helpless against a triumphant Mark. And then, the unthinkable happened. My father suddenly passed away in an accident. I felt regretful, thinking I hadn't done enough to honor him. Mark watched me with cold eyes as I cried so hard that my head hurt. He was like, if you cry, you'll just look uglier. I and my father didn't have any relatives. Inevitably, I was the one who had to take charge of the funeral. Mark quickly attended the funeral and left before the end. After everything was over, I was in a daze for a while. After the funeral, an unfamiliar man came to visit me. It turned out he was a lawyer appointed by my father.
Mr. Harrison entrusted me with the matter of the inheritance. Huh?
Hearing that my father left something for me made me happy. But considering he had to close his business a few years ago, I wasn't expecting much. Then I was floored.
$13 million? Yes, there will be some deductions, but... No, this can't be right.
He handed me a letter in my father's handwriting and a will. It said my father had left me a whopping $13 million. I was taken aback by the enormous amount. According to the lawyer, I had assumed my father's company had gone under due to financial difficulties, but he had actually chosen to sell it. That sale turned into the $13 million that was now being entrusted to me.
I understand, but...
Just because I'm his daughter, should I really inherit such a vast sum? Seeing me in shock, the lawyer smiled and said,
I've known Mr. Harrison for a long time. He always wished for your happiness. It might be confusing given the sudden news, but having money isn't a bad thing. Maybe consider accepting it as Mr. Harrison's wishes? But don't worry about the inheritance procedures and taxes. I'll handle all that.
I glanced down at my father's letter again and nodded. If this was something my father left wishing for my happiness, I'd be grateful to accept it.
Thank you for your assistance.
And so, I unexpectedly came into a lot of money. But I knew I couldn't just blow it all. In fact, I didn't even want to touch it. I'd keep it safe, and if I ever truly found myself in a bind, I'd use it for assistance. It became something of a good luck charm for me. Days passed, and I hadn't told anyone about the inheritance. One day, after coming home from work as usual, I was shocked by the scene before me.
What?
There was my bank statement that I issued before on the dining table. Mark was staring at it.
What are you doing? Why are you going through my documents without asking?
I tried to grab it, but Mark swiftly hid them close to his chest, smirking at me. That sneering grin of his.
What's the big secret? Hiding all this cash from me? Well, did you do something shady to get all this?
Mark's sarcastic gaze infuriated me, prompting a retort.
No. This is the inheritance my father, he left me.
I reached out to reclaim my document, but Mark tucked them into his shirt, refusing to give them back.
Give it back to me. Please. I always thought your dad was a good-for-nothing businessman who ran his company into the ground. Never imagined he'd leave such a gift behind.
Mark laughed mockingly and, as he stood up, he shoved me, causing me to fall flat on my rear. After I was pushed and landed on my rear, he looked down at me with a smug smirk.
Don't worry. I'll give it back. Just want to check everything out first.
Mark hummed to himself, checking them. When he finished looking, he casually tossed the document back in my direction.
All in all, $2 million, huh?
In reality, there was more. For emergencies, I had diversified the money into a new account. Mark seemed satisfied, grinning without a clue.
With this much, I can quit my job and even buy a house. Yeah. Maybe I'll take Dad and Mom on that trip they've always wanted to go on.
Despite it being the money I inherited, Mark started making plans as if it was his own. And, what's worse, he included my detested in-laws in those plans.
Don't decide things on your own.
This money came from the hard work my father put into his company. It wasn't for Mark to spend as he pleases.
This is what my dad left for me. You have no right to dictate how it should be spent.
It was a cry from the depths of my heart. But Mark just laughed it off, waving his hand dismissively.
All your money is mine now. And if you disagree, we're gonna get a divorce.
Emphasizing the word of divorce as if to threaten me, Mark left the house. Mark didn't return after leaving that day. He's probably staying at his parents' place, as usual. They must be having a bigger blast than usual this time. It's about those in-laws of mine and Mark. Dreaming about how they'll spend the $2 million. But those dreams will never come true. Things are different now. In the end, it was 2 days later when Mark returned home. In the evening, as I was vacuuming, I heard the front door swing open followed by heavy footsteps. The door between the hallway and the living room opened, and in came Mark, all smiles. But his smile faded instantly as he looked around.
What the heck is this? Oh, you're back after 2 days.
I continued to vacuum without a care. Mark looked around and said,
Why is all the furniture and luggage gone? Everything's gone.
Turning off the vacuum, I smiled sweetly at him.
Well, I decided to cancel the lease at the end of the month. But don't worry. Your stuff's right over there. Please sort it out by the end of the month.
I pointed to the luggage carelessly piled in the corner of the room. Mark stood there, mouth agape, in sheer surprise.
Wait, what's going on? This makes no sense. It's simple. I'm terminating the lease here, so you'll need to move out by the end of the month. I've already moved my stuff out. Whatever's left of yours by the end of the month, I'll toss. But why? I don't get why you'd terminate the lease.
Mark held his head in frustration.
You don't need to understand. Just leave, okay?
I ignored Mark and started to vacuum again. But then, my phone rang. I was interrupted again and answered the call.
Lisa?
It was my mother-in-law. She sounded unusually chipper over the phone. Yes, it's Lisa.
I heard from Mark. Good for you.
She kept rambling on without waiting for my response.
He regretted marrying someone as unattractive and as cold as you, who can't even have kids. But this time, we're thankful. Thankful for what? Well, thanks to you, we can now go on that vacation and even get a new car, right? Oh, I'm so excited. It's good to have someone who has money and a kind son.
I hated to break it to her, but I never promised such things. Mark probably spilled everything at my in-laws' house. He might have even said something like he would buy them anything.
Sorry to interrupt, but I never made such promises. And I have no intention of spending my money on you. Huh?
As my mother-in-law finally went silent, I took a deep breath.
You weren't seriously counting on using my money, were you? The money of the same person you've made fun of and belittled all this time?
It was the first time I'd ever spoken back to my mother-in-law since getting married. If I thought about who I'd used to be, I was like a completely different person. My mother-in-law just stood there silently, and Mark, standing in front of me, was gaping at me in shock. I waited a few seconds, but no response came from her.
Is that all you wanted to say? I'm quite busy, so excuse me.
I said quickly and then hung up the phone.
Lisa. How could you talk back to Mom like that? That's so rude. Rude? I was just pointing out a mistake.
Mark kept mumbling something, but I just continued cleaning. About 10 minutes later, there was a loud knocking on the door. I opened it to find my in-laws standing there. Seems like they'd rushed over after that phone call.
Lisa. What's going on?
As soon as they entered, my mother-in-law, her face beet red, started yelling.
How could you say something so hurtful? I was so shocked I felt like I was gonna faint.
Wish she had. My father-in-law was nodding in agreement next to her.
Lisa, maybe you're getting ahead of yourself because of all that money, but mind your manners. You're being very disrespectful.
It was the exact thing I wanted to say back to them. Who was the disrespectful one there? Just after my father passed away, they came to me and were like, good for you. They're disrespectful ones who acted as if my inheritance was theirs. While I was shaking with anger, my mother-in-law reached out her hand towards me.
What do you want? Your money is basically mine. What?
When I was puzzled, Mark added some clarification about my mother-in-law's actions.
She's asking for your money. I mean, you might become greedy and keep all the money to yourself. Hey. If anything, just transfer it to my account now. That'll make me feel better. Perfect. That's a great idea. If you have too much money, you might get taken advantage of or worse. Wives shouldn't have money.
While the three of them were getting all worked up, I rolled up the vacuum cleaner's cord and leaned the machine against the wall. And then, as I was preparing to leave, I firmly said,
What's all this talk about being a wife and cheating?
That's just some sound advice from my parents, for you to act properly as my wife.
Excuse me? I'm becoming single. What?
Sweat began to form on Mark's forehead.
What are you talking about, Lisa?
Mark's eyes darted from left to right.
You said if I didn't obey, we'd get divorced, right? I couldn't agree with your views, so I simply went ahead with the divorce process. Just like that? I never approved of this. That's forgery. There was no need for forgery.
I pulled several contract documents related to lawyer who assists divorce from my bag and tossed them onto the table. They fluttered to the floor.
Look, you've given me the contract with a lawyer. Every time I had an opinion, you'd shout divorce. You've handed me with a lawyer contact.
I can't count how many times I went along with his ridiculous demands, all because he used the threat of divorce.
You thought that just by mentioning divorce, I'd do whatever you said?
Mark gulped down his saliva.
Yeah, I did. Because you don't want to divorce me, right? I mean, come on, you know you don't, right?
Mark's voice wavered pathetically.
You thought that just because I didn't want a divorce, I'd obey again?
With a frown, Mark nodded.
After all, you love me, right? You want to be with me, right?
I couldn't help but sigh at his grave misunderstanding. Of course, I loved him once, enough to marry him. But just because you fall in love enough to get married, it doesn't mean that feeling will last forever. How can he not understand that after all his selfish acts? Such an egotist.
Sorry, but I don't love you anymore. In fact, I haven't loved you for quite a while. That's a lie.
The only reason I didn't divorce him earlier was because I didn't want to worry my father. I thought I was happily married. I wished that were the case. Looking back, my father might have known all along.
Now that my dad's passed away, I don't see any reason to continue this marriage with you. So, that's why you're giving up this apartment?
I gave a slight nod. Mark sank to his knees, shoulders drooping. My mother-in-law rushed over to Mark immediately.
It's despicable to abandon your loving husband the moment you get some money.
My father-in-law, still by Mark's side, glared at me.
Absolutely. You've made sweet Mark look like this. As an apology, pay him damages, you gold digger. Damages? I'm not obligated to pay any. What did you say? After all, I've done nothing wrong. Unlike Mark, who's been cheating left and right, I've never strayed.
Mark's face turned ghostly pale.
Your childhood friend Sarah, Harry from work, and that girl Lily from the bar, right?
Counting on my fingers, Mark's face got even paler. My mother-in-law looked away, avoiding eye contact.
Sarah is, well, different. I mean...
My mother-in-law stammered. Judging from her reaction, she probably knew about Mark's affairs, maybe even aided them.
Must have been tough, helping Mark create alibis for his affairs. But don't worry. The cameras and voice recorders I installed in Mark's car and bag have provided all the evidence I need.
When I said so, all three of them looked like they'd seen a ghost.
Come on, Lisa. I can't live without you. Don't dump me. That's right, Lisa. You have a lot of money. What do you want more? Why do you have to make Mark suffer more?
That's the first thing they're worried about? I let out a long sigh.
That money and our divorce are two different things. That money is what my father left for me. I didn't do anything to you. But you are cheating on me.
I'm determined to get divorced with him. There's no way back. Word's gonna get around, one way or another. Word might spread among our acquaintances. At work, bosses, colleagues, even those he merely recognizes might be talking behind his back. The local bars might not judge him too harshly, but he's likely lost his regular spot. There's no way Mark can continue living life as he once did.
Lisa, wait, hear me out. Give me another shot.
Mark was teary-eyed and shaking uncontrollably.
Another chance? This is my chance. Finally getting away from you and your parents.
Does Mark even realize how much pain I've endured during our 3 years of marriage? Actually, I went ahead and made the car and vacation bookings after getting caught up in the excitement that day. I might be able to cancel the vacation, but with the car dealership being a long-time contact, I can't back out now. He probably wants to say he doesn't have immediate money for these bills.
That's not my problem.
With that familiar retort, I tried to leave the apartment.
Hold on, Lisa. I'll leave the divorce matter to the lawyer. This is the last time I'm seeing any of you. Honestly, I won't miss this at all. Just make sure you tidy up before leaving. Your parents are here, so you don't have anything to worry. Bye.
I waved briefly, closed the door quickly, and jumped into my car. Just as I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Mark chasing after me from the entrance, but I didn't care and sped up. Soon, he was out of sight. Later, according to my lawyer, my mother-in-law and father-in-law gave him a hard time. And yet, he's my lawyer, and they went on complaining to him.
Just one little affair, she should have let it slide if she wanted a divorce. Exactly. It's such a trivial matter. Lisa should have laughed it off, she's so petty.
When my lawyer was like it wasn't just one affair. There were 3 other women. And considering the duration, it can't be brushed aside. This is a particularly severe case, they finally shut up. The very fact that Mark, a grown man, brought his parents to the discussion was laughable. My lawyer was like, after this fiasco, I doubt he's gonna get remarried, with a wry smile. As expected, word of Mark's infidelities spread like wildfire, turning his life upside down. Unable to bear the judgmental gazes of those around him, he quit his job. Married friends started to avoid him, and without money, he stopped going out to bars. Mark has been cooped up at my ex-in-law's house ever since. On the other hand, I've relocated to a distant state. It was my father's hometown. Not because I was searching for my grandparents. I simply wanted to experience life in the place where my father was born and raised. It's a town that's neither too urban nor too rural, just right. Now, I'm working part-time at a local grocery store. I haven't touched any of my father's inheritance yet. There were times I was tempted to spend it, but I'd always think of Mark and his family and hold back. If I start spending that money recklessly, it's over. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I'm content. When I meet my father someday, I genuinely want to be able to say I'm happy. From now on, I plan to live honestly.